Blood dripped from my IV as I clutched my newborn son against my chest. "Sign it," my mother-in-law hissed, throwing divorce papers at me like I was garbage. Behind her stood Jessica, the woman they'd chosen for my husband, wearing my wedding ring on her finger, smirking at me like she'd already won. They had no idea that with one phone call I could destroy everything they'd ever built. And that's exactly what I did. My name is Valentina, and they called me a gold digger. Ironic, right? Because what they didn't know was that I had more money than their entire family would see in 10 lifetimes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment I made the biggest mistake of my life, falling in love with a man who was too weak to protect me from his family. What you're about to hear isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about patience, power, and the sweetest revenge you could ever imagine. So stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand why silence can be the most dangerous weapon of all. I met Christopher at a charity event 2 years ago. I was there as an anonymous donor. I'd just written a check for $5 million to a children's hospital, but he thought I was one of the servers. Funny how life works, isn't it? He spilled champagne on my dress, apologized profusely, and insisted on buying me dinner to make up for it. He was charming, handsome, and seemed genuinely kind. For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me as just me. Not as the CEO of Tech Vista Corporation, not as a billionaire worth $3.7 billion, just Valentina. You see, I built my empire from absolutely nothing. My parents died when I was 19, leaving me with debt and a tiny life insurance policy. I taught myself coding, started a tech company in my studio apartment, and worked 20-hour days for 5 years straight. By 25, I was a millionaire. By 28, I was a billionaire. But money came with a price. Every person I dated suddenly became very interested in my bank account instead of my heart. My first serious relationship ended when I discovered he was planning to propose just to get access to my money. He'd even bragged about it to his friends. That's when I decided to hide who I really was. So when Christopher asked me out, I told him I was a freelance graphic designer. I dressed simply, drove an old car, and lived in what looked like a modest apartment. What he didn't know was that I owned the entire building, worth $45 million. My assistant Carlos and my best friend Sophia were the only ones who knew the truth, and they both warned me, Sophia especially. "Valentina, this is dangerous," she'd said. "What if his family is awful? What if he breaks your heart?" But I was stubborn. I wanted real love, and I thought I'd found it. The red flags started the moment I met Christopher's parents, his mother, Margaret, and his father, William. Old money, old values, and old cruelty. They looked at me like I was dirt on their expensive Italian shoes. Margaret's first words to me were, "So Christopher tells us you're a graphic designer." How quaint. The way she said it, you'd think I told her I collected garbage for a living. William just grunted and went back to his newspaper. But the worst part? There was already someone else at that dinner. Jessica. Jessica was Margaret's goddaughter, a supermodel from a wealthy family. Tall, beautiful, and cruel in that subtle way that rich people perfect over generations. She was sitting in what I later learned was supposed to be my seat, right next to Christopher. Margaret introduced her as practically family and made it clear that Jessica would be joining us for all family occasions. The entire dinner, Jessica touched Christopher's arm, laughed at his jokes, and shot me little smiles that said, he was supposed to be mine. I should have run right then. But I didn't. Because Christopher seemed different when we were alone. He told me he loved me. He said his parents would come around eventually. He promised me that their opinion didn't matter because he chose me. I believed him. God, I was so stupid. When Christopher proposed 6 months later, Margaret threw an absolute fit. She screamed that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. William threatened to cut him off financially. Jessica showed up at our apartment crying, saying she thought she and Christopher had something special. But Christopher stood firm, or so I thought. He married me despite their protests. The wedding was small and cold. Margaret and William barely attended, leaving halfway through the reception. And Jessica? She showed up wearing a white dress, trying to upstage me on my own wedding day. Our honeymoon in Bali was cut short after 3 days. William had a business emergency that Christopher needed to handle immediately. I spent the rest of what should have been the happiest week of my life sitting alone in a hotel room while my new husband worked. That's when Sophia called me. "I looked into William's company," she said. "Valentina, they're drowning in debt. They're going to need a buyout soon, and they're probably going to come to you." I laughed it off then. I hadn't told Christopher the truth yet, and I wasn't planning to until I was sure his love was real. Then I got pregnant. I was so excited. I imagined telling Christopher, seeing his face light up, planning our future together. I organized a family dinner to share the news. But when I arrived, Jessica was already there, sitting next to my husband, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. I announced the pregnancy, and the room went silent. Margaret's face twisted like she'd tasted something rotten. "Well," she finally said, "I suppose it was inevitable." William put down his fork and looked at me with disgust. "Let's hope the child doesn't inherit your limitations." Jessica's fake concern was even worse. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Valentina? Motherhood is so demanding, and you don't have any help or money for a nanny." That's when the real torture began. For the next 9 months, they systematically tried to destroy me. Family events were scheduled without telling me. I'd see photos later on social media. Christopher, Margaret, William, and Jessica, all smiling like a perfect family. I was cropped out of family pictures. When I did attend gatherings, Margaret criticized everything about me. My clothes were too cheap. My food choices were wrong for the baby. My career was embarrassing. And always, always Jessica was there, touching Christopher's shoulder, whispering in his ear, playing the role of the daughter-in-law Margaret actually wanted. By my 5th month, they'd convinced Christopher to move us into a house right next door to Margaret and William. I had no say in it. Margaret had a key to our house and would enter whenever she wanted, going through my things, making comments about how everything I owned was from a thrift store, and embarrassing for Christopher. Jessica was there constantly, claiming she was just helping out. The two of them would sit in my living room, discussing baby names and nursery designs like I wasn't even there. I started finding Jessica's perfume on Christopher's jackets. He came home later and later, always with an excuse about working on projects with Jessica. When I confronted him, he made me feel crazy. "You're being paranoid," he'd say. "It's just the pregnancy hormones." Margaret backed him up. "Don't be so insecure, Valentina. Jessica is family. You need to accept that." The baby shower was the breaking point. Margaret and Jessica planned the entire thing without asking my opinion once. Every gift was addressed to Christopher's baby, not Christopher and Valentina's baby. Jessica announced to everyone that she'd be the godmother. No one had asked me. No one cared what I thought. Margaret stood up and gave a speech about how Jessica will be more of a mother to this child than some people ever could be, while staring directly at me. I went to the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes. Sophia found me there. "End this," she begged. "Tell them the truth. Show them who you really are." But I couldn't. I needed to see how far they'd go. I needed to know beyond any doubt that Christopher would never protect me. In my 9th month, I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Margaret was on the phone in my kitchen, talking to someone about handling everything once the baby is born. I heard her mention lawyers and custody. My blood ran cold, but I stayed quiet. I documented everything, every cruel word, every exclusion, every moment of gaslighting. I had security cameras installed in my own home without telling anyone, recording their conversations when I wasn't there. I hired private investigators to follow Christopher and Jessica. What they found broke my heart, but didn't surprise me. Hotel rooms, romantic dinners, trips I knew nothing about. He'd been having an affair for 4 months, but I still said nothing. I waited. Labor started at 2 in the morning. Contractions hit me so hard I could barely breathe. I called Christopher. No answer. I called again. And again. Finally, I called Margaret. "Take a taxi," she said, annoyed. "We're busy." I called Sophia, and she rushed me to the hospital. 14 hours of labor, completely alone except for my best friend holding my hand. Christopher finally showed up at hour 12, smelling like Jessica's perfume, checking his phone every 5 minutes. When the nurse asked if he wanted to hold the baby, he said, "In a minute. I need to make a call," and left the room. I held my son, my beautiful baby boy Leo, and I cried. Not from joy, though I felt that too. I cried because I knew what was coming. I'd heard them planning it. I just didn't know when. 2 hours later, I got my answer. I was in my hospital bed, exhausted, trying to nurse Leo for the first time. My body hurt everywhere. I had stitches, my breasts ached, and I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. That's when my hospital room door burst open. Margaret, William, Christopher, and Jessica walked in like they owned the place. Jessica was dressed like she was going to a cocktail party, designer dress, perfect makeup, expensive jewelry, and on her finger, catching the light, was my wedding ring. Margaret's voice was like ice. "We need to discuss your future, or lack thereof." William dropped a stack of papers on my hospital bed, right next to where I was holding my newborn son, divorce papers. I looked at Christopher, waiting for him to say something, anything. He just stood there, staring at the floor like a coward. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Christopher, what's happening?" Margaret stepped forward, and the venom in her voice was so thick I could taste it. "You trapped our son with this pregnancy. You're a nobody from nowhere with nothing to offer. We've tolerated you long enough, but it ends now. Christopher deserves better. He deserves Jessica." That's when Jessica moved closer, holding up her hand so I could see my ring on her finger. "He gave this to me last week," she said, smirking. "We've been together for months, Valentina." "Did you really think he wanted you?" She pulled out her phone and showed me photos. Her and Christopher at romantic restaurants on weekend trips, kissing in his car. My world tilted on its axis. William's voice cut through my shock. "Sign the papers. We'll give you $50,000. Take the money and disappear." I held Leo closer to my chest, my hands shaking. "And my son?" I whispered. Margaret's smile was cruel. "The baby stays. He's a member of our family. You're not." She reached for Leo, trying to take him from my arms. I held him tighter, and he started crying. "No," I said. "You can't take my baby." William pressed the call button, and hospital security arrived within a minute. "This woman is causing a disturbance," Margaret told them, calm as anything. Jessica laughed. Actually laughed, at the sight of me, devastated and fighting to hold on to my child. Finally, Christopher spoke. His voice was weak, pathetic. "Just sign it, Valentina. Make this easy for everyone." That's when something inside me snapped. The grief, the humiliation, the months of torture, it all crystallized into pure, cold rage. I looked at my son, crying in my arms. I looked at these monsters surrounding my hospital bed, and I made my decision. "You want me to sign?" I said, my voice suddenly steady. "Fine. But first, let me make a phone call." I picked up my phone and dialed Carlos, my assistant. When he answered, I put it on speaker. My voice changed completely from the weak, broken woman they thought they'd destroyed to the CEO I actually was. "Carlos, it's me. Finalize the acquisition of Williams' company by Monday morning." There was a pause. "Yes, Ms. Rodriguez, the $340 million offer?" I looked directly at William. "No. Drop it to $50 million. Take it or leave it. They have 24 hours. I hung up. The confusion on their faces would have been funny if I wasn't so angry. "What are you talking about?" Margaret demanded. I smiled for the first time in hours. "Let me properly introduce myself. I'm Valentina Rodriguez, founder and CEO of Tech Vista Corporation. My net worth is $3.7 billion. William, your company has been failing for 2 years. You're drowning in debt, $200 million to be exact. My company was your only hope for a buyout, and you just blew it." I watched the realization dawn on their faces. It was beautiful. That modest apartment I lived in? I own the entire building. It's worth $45 million. My old car? I have a collection worth $8 million. And that charity event where I met Christopher? I was the anonymous donor who gave $5 million. Not a server, not a nobody. The most powerful tech CEO under 30 in the country. William's face went pale. Margaret actually stumbled backward, but I wasn't done. I turned to Jessica, and my smile grew colder. "That ring you're so proud of? It's fake. I replaced the real one months ago when I noticed it going missing. The actual ring, 3.5-carat diamond worth $85,000, is in my safe at home." I pulled out my phone and showed them security footage. Jessica sneaking into our bedroom, trying on my jewelry, taking photos for social media. "I have 6 months of footage," I said, "including the lovely recordings of you and Margaret planning how to get rid of me. Should I play them? Once she signs those papers, Christopher is yours." "The baby will forget her. Remember saying that?" Jessica's face went white. She looked like she might throw up. I turned to Christopher next. "You want a divorce?" "Granted. Remember that prenup you didn't bother reading because you were so in love?" I pulled a document from my hospital bag. I'd prepared for this moment. "Infidelity clause. You get nothing. I have 6 months of evidence from private investigators, photos, hotel records, credit card statements. You signed away any claim to my assets, my property, or my income." Christopher's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You spied on me?" he stammered. "No," I said coldly. "I protected myself from a man who was never worth my trust." Then I turned to Margaret and William, and this was the moment I'd been waiting for. "Your company? I'm buying it for $50 million. That's 85% less than market value. You have $200 million in debt. My offer barely covers a quarter of it." William tried to bluster. "You can't do this. That company has been in our family for 3 generations. I shrugged. "Should have thought about that before you called me an incubator. Refuse my offer and you'll file bankruptcy within 90 days. I've already contacted your creditors and lined them up, every single one." Margaret tried a different approach, putting on tears like a costume. "Please, Valentina, we can work this out. We can be a family." "My name is Ms. Rodriguez to you," I interrupted. "And no, we can't." I pressed my call button, and this time, my personal security team arrived, 6 professionals I'd had on standby. "Please escort these people out of my hospital room. They're no longer welcome in my life." William tried to threaten me. "I'll sue you for everything." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Try it. I have 47 lawyers on retainer. How many do you have? Oh wait, you can't afford any now, can you?" As security moved them toward the door, Margaret made one last desperate attempt to grab Leo from my arms. My security stepped between us immediately. "Touch my son, and I'll have you arrested for assault," I said calmly. "And Margaret?" "I've already contacted every social organization, charity board, and country club you belong to. I sent them the recordings of your cruelty. By tomorrow morning, you'll be blacklisted from every event in this city. Your reputation is over." I looked at Jessica, who was crying now, real tears this time. "Your modeling contract? Terminated as of now for moral clause violations. I own 40% of your agency. You're done." Then to Christopher. "Your trust fund? It's secured against a loan from my company. I'm calling it. You have 30 days to pay back $2 million. Good luck." And finally, back to Margaret and William. "Full custody of Leo is mine. You signed papers saying you didn't want me. Excellent evidence for court. You'll never see this child again." Security escorted them out. Jessica was screaming. Margaret was crying. William was threatening lawsuits he couldn't afford. And Christopher? He just stood there, frozen, realizing he'd lost everything. The door closed, and it was just me and Leo. I looked down at my son, sleeping peacefully now, completely unaware of the war that had just been fought over him. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "Mama's got you. And Mama's got everything else too." The next week, the story broke everywhere. Tech billionaire reveals secret identity after family betrayal was on every news site, every social media platform, every talk show. The public's sympathy was entirely with me. Christopher's phone reportedly had over 800 missed calls from his parents. Jessica's social media was destroyed, thousands of comments calling her a homewrecker, a gold digger, everything they'd called me. Margaret and William had photographers camped outside their house, which they'd soon have to sell anyway. When I left the hospital 3 days later, I didn't go back to Christopher's house. I went to my real home, an 8,000-square-foot penthouse on the top floor of the city's most exclusive building. Floor-to-ceiling windows with skyline views. A nursery I'd had designed months ago, filled with everything Leo could ever need. Sophia moved in to help me adjust to motherhood, and my home was filled with love, support, and peace for the first time in a year. The consequences unfolded exactly as I'd planned. William's company sold for $50 million. After paying debts, they were left with $3 million, from a company once worth $340 million. They had to sell their mansion and move into a small condo. Margaret's social exile was complete. Her country club revoked her membership. Her friends wouldn't return her calls. She had to shop at regular stores, drive a regular car, live a regular life. The woman who'd mocked me for being poor was now living the life she'd looked down on. Jessica's modeling career imploded overnight. Her agency dropped her. Brands pulled their contracts. Her social media followers turned on her viciously. Someone photographed her working retail at a department store, and the image went viral. The ring she'd been so proud of? She tried to sell it, only to discover it was cubic zirconia worth $40. The humiliation nearly broke her. But Christopher had it worst of all. With his trust fund called in and no way to pay, he lost everything. His luxury apartment, his car, his lifestyle. All gone. He had to move back in with his parents in their tiny condo. All three of them crammed into a 2-bedroom, living on William's savings, watching it drain away month by month. Christopher's friends abandoned him. No company would hire him. Who wants to employ the man who betrayed a billionaire? He became a cautionary tale, a punchline, a loser. 3 months after Leo was born, Christopher started showing up outside my office building. Security would turn him away, but he kept coming back. One day, I was leaving with Leo in his stroller, surrounded by my security team, when Christopher broke through and got close enough to speak. "Valentina, please," he begged. "Can we talk?" "That's my son. I have rights." I stopped and looked at him, really looked at him. He'd lost weight. His expensive clothes had been replaced with cheap ones. He looked broken. "You signed away your rights," I said calmly. "Remember?" "I made a mistake," he shouted, desperate. "It was my mother's idea. I love you. Please." I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, nothing. "You had a queen and treated her like a beggar," I said. "You had a family and chose a mistress. You had everything and traded it for nothing. Do not contact me again, or my lawyers will make sure you regret it even more than you already do." I walked away without looking back. Behind me, I heard him collapse, sobbing on the sidewalk. Paparazzi photographed it. The headline the next day was, "Fallen Man Begs Billionaire Ex-Wife for Mercy." I didn't read the article. He wasn't worth my time anymore. 6 months after everything fell apart, I was on the cover of Forbes, Time, and Business Weekly. TechVista's stock was up 45%. Baby Leo was healthy, happy, and thriving. I'd surrounded him with love. Sophia, Carlos, my real friends who'd been there all along. I started a foundation called For Women Who Were Told They Weren't Enough. We helped domestic abuse victims escape, funded their legal battles, provided housing and job training. I became an inspiration to millions of women who'd been made to feel small. 1 year after Leo's birth, I hosted the biggest charity gala of the year. $10,000 per ticket, and every elite in the city attended. Margaret and William saw it on the news from their small condo, unable to afford even the parking fee for the venue. Jessica watched it on social media, remembering when she used to attend these events. Christopher saw me on the red carpet, stunning in a red dress, confident, powerful, happy. I was holding Leo, now a year old and laughing at the cameras, and I wasn't alone. I'd started dating someone new, someone who'd known me before I revealed my wealth, someone kind and genuine who loved me for me. At the gala, I gave a speech. Some people tried to break me when I was at my most vulnerable, I said to the crowd of hundreds. They thought I was weak because I was kind. They thought I was worthless because I was humble. They were wrong on every count. Tonight, we've raised $12 million for women who are where I once was, to show them that your worth is not determined by those who can't see it. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. I had tears in my eyes, but they were tears of triumph, not pain. That night, I thought about Margaret, William, Jessica, and Christopher, each in their separate, broken lives. They'd wanted status. I had it. They'd wanted wealth. I controlled it. They'd wanted respect. The world gave it to me while taking it from them. Everything they'd tried to take from me had multiplied in my hands. Everything they'd had crumbled to dust. And the most beautiful part? I didn't have to destroy them. They destroyed themselves the moment they underestimated me. So that's my story. They wanted me to disappear, but instead I rose higher than they could ever reach. They wanted to take my child, but instead I gave him a life filled with more love and opportunity than they could ever provide. They wanted my silence, but instead I used my voice to help thousands of women find their own strength. Here's what I learned. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just living so well that your enemies can't look away from your success. It's being so happy that their cruelty becomes irrelevant. It's turning your pain into power and your struggles into purpose. Never let anyone make you feel small when you were born to be extraordinary. Your worth exists whether others see it or not, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to stay down when they try to keep you there. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications because I share real stories of people who refused to let cruelty win. Comment below, I am enough. Let's build a community of people who know their worth. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they think. Send it to them. Let them know they can rise from anything. I'm Valentina, and remember, the best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. See you in the next story.